Hello and welcome to Wave Clinical Support. From your case, I see you have a patient who's previously worn soft multifocal lenses and you've switched to wave lenses for better visual outcomes. Unfortunately, from your design, you're experiencing some lenses that are centering kind of high and not having great success overall. Well, let's take a peek and see your designs. I noticed from your both your designs that you sent, the right and the left have similar designs with similar characteristics, and so anything that we talk about in this short video will apply to both eyes. So mainly I'll look at the left eye today. So when we look at your cornea, you have a pretty straightforward looking cornea, and I think you've run across one of the perplexing dilemmas that many of us wave fitters have fit through the years, that straightforward looking cornea with relatively straightforward information and expecting a nice clean wave design that'll center nicely perfectly, and find out the lens sits high no matter what you do. And so they can be some of the hardest ones to fix, but with that said, there's a couple things I might recommend that may help you get back on track. Well, first off, we look at the design that you chose. I see you went with an axial design, and with your second design from your notes, I understand that you went a little steeper. So I think you did all the right things that all of us would have done. I would have done the exact same thing to try to get that lens to center, but unfortunately it's still not centering. So let's talk about some of the dynamics here. If we look at this topography, if you look very closely, it looks like we have a little flatter area maybe in this upper zone and maybe just a little steeper. Although it's really clinically, you think it's clinically insignificant, something's causing this unique dynamic for this lens to sit a little bit higher. It could be a little bit of a lens or lower lid interaction pushing up. It could be this upper lid somehow grabbing the lens and holding it up there, although I wouldn't expect that in the plus, but just about anything can happen in these situations. So a couple things we might try. One thing is you could just go to a lot larger lens. I don't know exactly what your iris diameter is here, but sometimes I've gone up to as much as 11.5 with these patients, and that seems to help them out quite a bit. Another thought, although most of us are successful with the axial design, if you remember, axial designs tend to mimic that central topography very closely, and the data in the peripheral cornea is not necessarily as accurate or as precise. Tangential, on the other hand, tends to look a little more precisely at the peripheral cornea and not align as precisely in the central cornea. So sometimes if we sense there might be some peripheral challenges out here, quite often I'll switch over to tangential mode, redesign the lens in that mode, and that can work out really well. On a side note, I tend to find that quite often patients like the comfort of a tangential lens a little bit better than the axial, but both can work well. I just find myself sometimes going to one lens design or the other if I'm backed in a corner. With that said, if these lenses are exceptionally comfortable for the patient, and coming from a soft lens, I know that's sometimes a bit of a challenge, but if they are comfortable, certainly staying in this 10.9 to 11.5 range is feasible. One thought is to try to get this lens to drop down, if going larger on its own won't help, is maybe trying to steepen up this upper meridian, flattening out the lower one, so maybe that steeper part will sort of push off this upper cornea, forcing the lens down a little bit lower. And the way we would do that is go to freeform design. Before I do that, I sort of like to get a fresh alignment with that topography. Let the computer do a little designing for us. Take a moment, and once that comes to design, I'm going to switch on to this fluorescein design just so we can maybe highlight or better illustrate the idea there. Okay, so we have a lens here that's pretty well lined overall, and if we want to get that upper quadrant a little steeper, we can go to 50% and just bring this upper one down a little bit, steepen that up. I tend to like not to have these little downturners on these corners here. We got it pretty nicely aligned, and is a little bit steeper in that upper meridian. Notice we're a little flatter down here. I'd probably bring that in a little bit just for a comfort standpoint. And I like to keep it nicely aligned out there. So we have, in this case, we got a lens that's a little steeper on the top, a little flatter on the bottom, with the hope that it'll kind of push off that upper zone to push it down here lower. And that can be a successful design also. Well, one design I might encourage you to look very closely at, if you haven't already, are the semi-scleral lenses. And what we're finding as wave designers, many of us are finding quite a bit of success in these large diameter lenses. And I'd encourage you to go to the Wave Design website to look at the video on how to design a semi-scleral lens. I'll send you the link. There's an 8-point step for designing one of those lenses, and they can be very successful. From a personal note, I found that in these lenses, they can go about 14 millimeters in diameter, and they fit very similar to a soft lens from a comfort standpoint. Patients tend to tolerate them very well, and they tend to center quite well. And so if I show you very quickly how we do it, I don't know the exact measurements. You'll have to pull those from your topography. But if we go over here to this little design tool, configuration settings, generally speaking, most of the OZs on these lenses are going to be right around 5.5 to 6, and then usually about 2 millimeters larger. We usually like to keep the edge thickness pretty high on these. And in this case, if it were somewhere around 14, and once again, I would really encourage you to follow the details in the 8-point design very closely, and that'll walk you right through it. But just for a point of illustration here, I'll show you basic design. In the 8-point design, we just did the first few steps in that design, adding in all that data. I'll let this finish doing its calculations. One thing I should also mention while we're waiting on that, your original designs, I thought the edge thicknesses were pretty good. You might even try to thin out that edge a little bit more. I've gone down to maybe 12 from the 16. That might be also helpful in keeping that lens tucked under that upper lid for positioning. That'll get a little more weight to the center of that lens. Okay, so now I got a lens that's pretty well designed. So that's one of the first steps in lens design. The next step, in that design is getting a little more apical clearance. So basically, we want to bring that up a little bit here by clicking down in the blue. We like to get that central clearance up to around 9 or 10. And that should work nicely. Next step is we want to get some tear pumping in there, so we're going to click this up about 5 steps or so. After that, we want to pin this purple dot. And all the meridians. And then you got a lens that's pretty well designed. And this design was sort of the shortened version of that, but I would encourage you to see that 8-point step. And I think any of those designs can be very helpful. I would encourage you to really look at this design very closely. I think any of those suggestions should give you a better shot of getting those lenses centered. And just to review, staying with an axial or tangential design, I'd probably go up to about 11.5 millimeter if you can tolerate it. Consider going a little steeper on the top, a little flatter on the bottom, see if you can push that lens down a little bit. Outside of that, maybe considering going to the semi-scleral lens, and hopefully you'll be a little more successful with that case. With that said, I wish you the best of luck with your wave designs. Have a great day.